All right, hi Ashley.
Hi, TJ. Did you say how am I?
Yes, how are you?
I'm I'm here. I'm good, I think.
Okay,
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm a little tired, and it's a little dreary outside, but hopefully this um, topic will kind of perk things up a little bit. So I don't know, we'll see. As you know, I have been thinking about this topic of like, how do I know something I've written or read for that matter is
Mhm.
necessary? It feels necessary, whatever that word means. I'm trying to figure out what that word means to me. But I thought it would be cool to talk to other people who I respect and who I know are interested in writing or even just creating anything, and what they think of that. Like, how do they know what when it's necessary? So I'm not going to like start with that just impossible open-ended question, but
Thank you.
maybe like um, say a little bit about like your writing life right now. Like, what's it like? I know you're super busy. You've got a lot going on.
Yeah.
I imagine that you're still trying to write. So how does that happen?
I mean, try is the operative word, honestly. I am actually kind of in the middle of a struggle with writing right now, which is interesting. I haven't really written a lot of poems, which is kind of normal. I should back up and say I'm not really someone who is always writing all year. Like I mean, even when I was in school, obviously I did it because y'all were asking for it. But I didn't feel bad if like for half the week I didn't want to write anything or I had to just kind of like make it work to get the grade. And so now what that looks like now that I'm not being graded, I don't force myself to write if I don't feel like it. So I don't write every day. And sometimes I'll go a month, many months without writing anything.
Mhm.
That's getting a little more challenging because now there are deadlines involved. For example, I have a book due in April, and it's a book of essays. And yeah, we'll see where those come from, honestly, by April.
Wow, April. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's coming up.
look, it's like on my mind.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
earlier
awesome.
today when you said you look stressed, like I'm sure subconsciously all the stuff is just like
Yeah,
coming out on my
yeah,
face.
yeah.
Um,
Well,
yeah.
it just occurred to me actually, like it's because of all the stuff that you've got going on. I mean, Ashley is the poet laureate of the state of Alabama. She's got a book out, Reparations Now. She's mover and a shaker both locally and regionally and nationally. Just got a lot of stuff going on in the New York Times. And well, I was going to let the cat out of the bag, so I won't say that. But lots of stuff going on,
Mhm.
and I wonder, like, now that I think about it, do you feel a burden for like everything you write to be necessary, to be
Ooh,
important, to be speaking to
yeah.
some crucial thing?
You are hitting a nail, I think,
Mm,
on some of my thoughts these days. I think I don't know that I feel pressure with everything that I write per se. I'm trying to figure out how to phrase it. Like, as I said before, I don't write every day. So like I don't get those like random, I guess, throwaway things.
mm,
It's true. Most of the time when I'm writing, it's for a reason, but I try not to put pressure on the poem to like be everything. I just let the poem be. I'll give a specific example. I am going to be a part of an event called the Alabama Colloquium on February 28th
mm,
with the Alabama Humanities Alliance. And we're honoring Bryan Stevenson and the late John Lewis, which is exciting for me
yeah.
because John Lewis like was a huge hero of mine, and I did get to meet him once
Oh, cool.
while he was alive. I mean, it was looking back, like I was terrible. I was just like assisting my sister, who's a
Mm,
journalist. We were at the Miami Book Fair.
mm,
March had just come out, like the first book I think had just come out, and so she was excited about it. I was like excited, but I guess preoccupied because there was a lot of stuff as usual. I had a lot of stuff going on.
mm,
And so we were going to get our book signed. And she was like, okay, cool. We're going to get a picture. And I, of course, was like, well, I guess, I don't know. And when we got there, like he was so nice, like
mm,
inhumanly kind person,
yeah.
stood there with every single person in that line, in the long line. and talked to us as if we were his cousin or something like that. Like, it was just a beautiful time. I took their picture, and I just, I felt better about life just meeting
Right.
this man. So I'm excited. It's a long tangent,
Okay.
to say that I was excited to write a poem to commemorate this moment, because we're going to give a framed copy of the poem to Bryan Stevenson and to John Lewis's family.
Okay.
So huge, a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
because they're expecting something magical, I guess, from me. And I should say too, I have not bought into the myth of Ashley M. Jones. Like, I'm just Ashley, so when people are like, oh my gosh, you got to write this poem, I'm like, well, I'll write something, but
That's good.
I don't know. Right, exactly. I mean, I'm not allowed to get a big head. I have a good family that keeps me grounded. So, but anyway, I was worried about this poem. And at first I started to do that thing that you asked, to like say, okay, this poem has to be like the most groundbreaking thing. It's for John Lewis. It's for Bryan Stevenson. Who knows who's going to see this piece? And that was kind of getting in my head. And I had to just step back and say, wait a minute. Every poem you've written, you've been able to listen to whatever is the thing, whatever, you want to call it, that gives me the inspiration. If I stop doing that now, of course it's going to be terrible. Of course it's going to be hard, So what I had to do was really just shut everything off and just let myself live. I knew there was a deadline, and I just said, you know what? A poem's going to get written one way or another. Something is going to come out of you. And sure enough, I set, I think, a date on my calendar, because I do have to schedule time with myself on my calendar. I set a date to sit down and just try to write something. And I ended up writing a poem that I really liked, and it didn't feel like the world was crashing down on me. This was just a poem, like any other poem. And it ended up, people liked it, when I sent it in for their feedback, they liked it a lot. But I think the only reason the poem was able to happen is because I didn't think like, this must be an Ashley M. Jones masterpiece. Like, first of all, that does not exist. Let's eliminate that. But yeah, so no, I try not to think that way, because I think the writing would be terrible if I did think that way.
Is it different for, like, it sounds like you're writing nonfiction a little bit now, essays and stuff, which is a little bit of a branching out for you, I think. So is that a different experience writing that stuff? The burden of necessity?
Yes and no. I mean, the biggest difference I have to say with essays is, well, there's, I guess, two. One is the time commitment. I don't know how y'all prose people have been doing this for so long. Like, this is a scam. It takes so long to write something. Right. And then, like, sometimes, like with a poem, you write a line that's trash, you can just delete the line. But with an essay, like, pages, like, right. So yeah, I hate that. And then also, there's not a lot of space to hide in an essay. And one could say that my poems are pretty honest, but they're still poems. Like, there's still the white space. The essay is just there. Like, I'm saying what I'm saying, and there's no, like, metaphor in which I can just crawl back into. It's just, oh no, but she did say that. It's there. It is. So that has been different. And necessity does come to mind, because with so many words as a poet, I'm always like, does this matter? Am I just going on and on? Is anybody going to read this and actually care about what I'm saying? Could I have said this faster in a poem? So yeah, it's weird.
Weird. Well, that makes me think about audience too. Like, do you ever write stuff that isn't for an audience? You know what I mean? Because I don't think, like, when I for the first like 20 years of my writing life, quote unquote, like, I don't think I ever wrote something that wasn't supposed to be like read by 100,000 people. Never was, right? But that was my mentality. It's like, it has to have a huge, biggest audience it can have. And that's the goal. And more and more now, first of all, just that's problematized by the fact that I don't have that audience, but most people don't. And then I'm thinking about, like, the different styles of writing or types of writing, that maybe it's like one person or 7 people, or maybe just yourself, and I think if you're in a if you came up in the sort of program style of programs that you and I both did, I don't know how it was for you, but for me, the idea of writing just for yourself, or that there's not an audience, that was always kind of like, if it was ever considered at all, it was, ridiculed in a way.
Right. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, it's like we're kind of taught to look down on people who say, well, I just write to get my feelings out. Like some
Right.
people are like, oh, what a heinous
Right.
thought to write to get your feelings out. I mean,
Right.
yeah, we maybe don't need to open that soapbox at all, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do write stuff just for myself, sort of. Well, okay, maybe there's a lot of answers to this question, actually. I think I start, like when I write anything, I'm not thinking about the end goal exactly. Like people have asked me in the past, like, oh, so do you start out thinking, here's the book and it's going to do this and this and that? No, I really don't. I'm starting out with, oh, there's a poem on my mind. I got to get it on paper for me because it's in my mind and it needs to be out of it, but I'm not thinking, so this publisher can read it or it can be published wherever place. Now, sometimes that's true if it's like a deadline sort of thing, but even then, like, again, the work can't really succeed for me if I'm not just listening to the work. I don't know if that makes sense, but
yeah.
Yeah, I can't really think too much about audience, but when I do think about audience, I've had to really sort of train myself to think sort of along the lines of like Toni Morrison, where she talked about having an audience that wasn't centered around like, I guess, the white gaze or even traditional publishing, even thinking about somebody like Gwendolyn Brooks, like learning about how she stepped away from one of these big New York publishers to publish with a small Black press for the rest of her career. Like that kind of, I don't know, just changed the way that I thought about what you have to do, and who is reading you. So for me, even if the audience is one person, and even if that one person is me, like that is kind of enough, at least at the beginning, like I feel like if, and again, just for me, maybe somebody else can work on this, audience first model. But for me, if I'm not kind of lasered into what I need or to the idea that maybe nobody's ever going to see it, then the work is not going to be as authentic, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay, so maybe I will now circle back around to the what does it mean to have something be necessary? And maybe this is the time I invited you to think about a text, either one that you wrote or that somebody else wrote that feels necessary to you. And maybe that's the segue in. You can read that and then say why you think it's necessary.
Yes. So I am a good student, as you know. So I have two examples ready to go.
Nice.
Yeah. Hey, you already know me, TJ.
Yeah.
You've known me for more than half of my life, I think.
That's probably true. Yeah.
And I'm always ready for action. So I was thinking about, as soon as you told me or you asked me earlier today, to maybe come up with something, I thought about these two poems, and of course they're by Lucille Clifton. I know everybody's bored of me talking about Clifton, but I don't care. I love her. She's infinitely useful and necessary to me. So these two poems are short in her, in her usual style, but they speak to two different parts of necessity for me. So the first one is called Why Some People Be Mad at Me Sometimes. And I have to give a little background. I just learned this, like, I don't know, a few weeks ago. I was preparing a talk about Clifton and I was, looking up this poem. I had known about it for a few years and loved it, but I found her speaking about this poem and the story behind it. She was Maryland's poet laureate for a number of years. And when she, like, I think around the time she was first commissioned, the governor had some sort of like celebration thing for Maryland. And the theme was our happy colonial days. Right? Like, yeah. So the governor said, well, poet laureate, can you write something for this occasion? And Clifton said, I had already told her or him or whoever they are, I don't do occasion poems. I don't do something else, she said. She has like a list of things she didn't do. But she ended up writing for this happy colonial days thing. I don't know what poem that was. Like, I don't even know if it exists, for us to see. But she said, I wrote that poem, and then I wrote this poem for me, which actually, interestingly, speaks exactly to what we're talking about. I didn't plan that part. It's just,
there you go, serendipity.
Brought it here, yeah. So why some people be mad at me sometimes. They ask me to remember, but they want me to remember their memories, and I keep on remembering mine. And that's it. That's the poem. There's really nothing else you have to say, I think, after that. But I chose this one first because I think something that's necessary to read or to write is something that speaks a truth, which I think that kind of aligns with your little 3 criteria that I've read on your blog before, but something that reveals a truth and something that like changes thinking in some way. Out of focus. These little self-focusing webcams, also a scam. Like,
yeah, I'm low tech over here, man.
Well, I mean, sometimes
I'm trying to decide, do I open the window or close it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know which is better, just the regular or this high quality.
It looks pretty fancy.
Anyway, well, I mean, I'll tell you about this later, but
okay.
These are a scam. So anyways, this poem has always just struck me. And I actually, the place that I found it was this conference called Split This Rock, which is in DC. And their organization is focused on like social justice poetry. So right up my alley. And I remember going for the first time. This whole trip was like super magical. I feel like my whole life is just like surrounded by magic all the time. But I was up there.
Good thing.
Well, yeah, it's sometimes kind of scary because it's like, ooh, like, what is all this for? Is it going to crash and burn? Anyway, so I was up there because I had placed in the Sonia Sanchez Langston Hughes contest. And this was the first time I got to meet Sonia Sanchez, actually. But I was there just kind of like wandering around, and they had poems on these pillars, like painted on the pillars, or no, they were written. Like, we were all encouraged to write on these big like pieces of butcher paper. And so I was looking around and I saw this written there, like in real life, written by somebody's hand. And I was like, oh, this is what poetry should do. It should just be here, organically, and it should just knock me back just while I'm standing here randomly. And that's what this one did. So I do aspire to be as succinct and clear and necessary as this poem. I think we need to like wear this as a badge right now during all these discussions of what theory that I won't say because we're both employed as teachers, but y'all, everybody out there, the theory. But I think this poem speaks to that very clearly. Yeah, so that's that one.
Okay.
And then the other one is Surely I Am Able to Write Poems by Clifton. Surely I am able to write poems celebrating grass and how the blue in the sky can flow green or red, and the waters lean against the Chesapeake shore like a familiar. Poems about nature and landscape, surely, but whenever I begin, the trees wave their knotted branches, and why is there under that poem always an other poem? So this one, I've also known for a while, but it kind of exploded for me after hearing the poet Camille Dungy give a talk a couple of years ago for the Magic City Poetry Festival. She was talking about nature poetry, and she started with this poem. And I had never really thought of it as a nature poem at all, but it is. And she explained that there's a lineage, especially with Black poets, of writing about nature, because she edited this anthology called Black Nature, because people think that we can't write about like roses or anything. It has to always be like burn it down,
right,
for a good reason, honestly. But but her explanation was, well, it's not that we can't, it's that there's so much even on the nature that we have to wade through. Just like this poem says, like seeing a tree is not just a tree. It's really never been that way for me since I've known about the history of my people. As a little kid, I remember, driving through country areas or like going to see my grandma, and there's like all these trees everywhere. And all I could think was, there's way too many places for somebody to string us up as
Mm.
a tiny little child. Like that's what I was thinking.
Right.
So, the necessity piece there is, again, telling the truth, but, trying to also assert we can do this thing,
Right.
but we have to do this other thing first. For
Right.
those who think like, oh, we can't waste all this time talking about politics, blah, 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 like, but we have to. We're alive here right now. It's
Yeah.
necessary. So
Yeah. That makes me think of, or it calls to mind something I've been thinking about, the term sovereignty, personal sovereignty, and there's a nobility in that, and it's more than just control. It's asserting rights and responsibilities and an agency, and especially the first Clifton poem, but even the idea of how do you like assert your sovereignty over a space or over just the act of writing a poem, you know, and not having somebody take away that from you, or not yielding it because that's what's expected or something like that,
Yeah.
And that's hard. I think that's a big challenge for I think probably everybody. I don't find it easy to even say that I would claim my sovereignty. I don't even know what that means, but it feels important to have that kind of confidence. There's a confidence component to necessity, and being confident enough. I'm just thinking out loud as I want to do it,
Yeah.
but and being confident enough to not worry about what other people think, and not worry about the audience, and not worry about how it's received. That's not even a part of the equation, really. For that idea, that confidence or sovereignty, or be yourself out loud on the page.
Yeah. I think that idea of being myself and not worrying about what others think, which maybe is the sovereignty part. Like, I have self-awareness and control over how I present myself, maybe. Like that thing, I think, is important just for like being a human, honestly.
Right.
That's been a key ingredient for me forever. Well, for not maybe forever, but for a while. I've always been someone who's I don't really know how to be anybody but myself. Like, I've tried to be other people, and like it never works for me. And I mean, I have to credit my family, as I do with everything. Again, people are bored of that, I'm sure, but don't care.
No.
Sovereignty.
There you go.
But we were taught from an early age, like, you have to be proud of yourself, you're worthy, and I had to relearn that as a human and as a poet as well. Like, I mean, going through formal education can sometimes like steal all of your confidence around many things. I mean, sitting at that workshop table and having people, in some cases, rip your stuff apart or question why you wrote it or not understand it or whatever, for whatever reason, not just like in my case, being a Black person in rooms where I was either the only or like one of three or whatever. There was that part, but it's true for, I think, everybody. Everybody at one point around that table feels totally alienated and like, I should just stop writing because this isn't good, nobody likes it or whatever. So for me, try to get back on track, Ashley. So for me, sticking close to the idea that what I have to offer is useful and is necessary, that's really been the thing that's kept me going in all avenues of life, honestly. And I really do believe that, not in an egotistical way. I mean, I am a Leo, so whatever, take that as you will. But I do think we're all here because we have something to offer.
Mhm.
We have good and bad things to offer. I think our challenge through life is finding those good things and offering the good things as much as we can, and maybe finding a way to like turn the bad things into something else, or throw them in the garbage or something like that. um, but yeah, that's my take on the sovereignty thing. I don't know if I'm on the same train as you, but
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, I like that. Um, yeah, that helps. And that connection to, like, there is no um, use in trying to say, well, this is me as a writer, and this is me as a me,
mhm,
and trying to split it. There isn't. And
right,
so that's a part of the necessity thing too. If it doesn't blend those two things, then it's not authentic, and it's not
right,
necessary to you, and it's not going to be necessary to other people, you know.
right.
And that's something that I think I'm coming to understand a little bit better in my old age. um, just that, how neurotic it can be if you're writing for the wrong reasons,
Mhm,
and if
mhm,
you're this unnecessary writing is often rooted in that something that isn't um, healthy, like personally healthy,
mhm, mhm.
usually. Um, Not always. I mean, sometimes there's throwaway writing that it doesn't, manifest your neurosis, but a lot of times, especially if you expect somebody else to read it,
Mhm.
a lot of times it does, in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I cannot separate Ashley the poet from Ashley the human. We are the same person. I mean, Ashley the poet's a little bit louder, I think, than Ashley the
Mhm.
human. But the poet is still a human. So
Right. Lucky for us. All right. Well, that was awesome. Thank you for your time. And hopefully I can convince you to write a 30 things you love right now list, and I'll post that with this interview. And I'm looking forward to reading that. A lot of cool stuff on that,
yeah,
I'm
I'm
sure.
looking forward to reading it too, actually.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ashley Jones.
You're welcome. Thank
All
you.
right. Have a good night. See ya.
See ya.